And so if I were to go back and give myself advice, I would just remind myself that what we're doing when we're creating these relationships doesn't have to be temporal. It could be something that is structural and building for a lifetime.
Welcome to the Technical Difficulties Podcast. I'm Liz Gerber and a design professor at Northwestern.
And I'm Lauren Lynn, and I'm a student who has also worked in the design industry. Each week, we speak with women leaders in design and technology.
Welcome or welcome back to the Technical Difficulties Podcast, where we celebrate the careers of amazing female designers and technologists. We're so excited to welcome Liz Danzico. Liz is a designer, educator, and full-time dog owner whose visionary work has reshaped digital storytelling and human-centered design at both for-profits and nonprofits. As vice president of design at Microsoft AI, she's currently pioneering the next generation of interfaces that make complex technology feel intuitive and humane. At National Public Radio, she co-founded the Public Radio Incubation Lab to bring transformative ideas to life in public media. But before all this, before iPhone, Twitter, Instagram, Slack, and Zoom, and many other technologies we know and live with today, she co-founded the School of Visual Arts MFA Interaction Design program. She anticipated the pervasive role that technology would play in our lives. As a visionary, she's consulted for the New York Times, TED Prize, This American Life, and many others. Join us as Liz shares the lessons she's learned at the intersection of design, education, and leadership. We can't wait to hear from you, Liz. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Thrilled. So, quick warm-up questions just to get you going. What is your favorite way to start the morning?
Well, let's see. If I have my way, I love to start the morning by doing my morning routine with my dog, which is getting up first thing and getting outside immediately with my dog. So no coffee yet. Coffee is very important, but doing something, sort of taking a walk, long walk, or taking a run, which is the ideal morning, and sort of like getting a sense of what I always think it's like, what does the city want to tell you? Like, what is the city feeling like that, And so it's weather, it's like, what is the mood of the people? And you can sense that if you immediately get outside. And then quickly coffee.
So did you do that this morning? And if so, what is the city telling you this morning?
Here, it's very humid, and it very oppressively humid. And so there's not a lot of people out. So I think the weather's changing quickly over the course of the day already. But when it's that sort of muggy and humid, I think people are inside and kind of like in their places. So it was very quiet. So the city is kind of like preparing for a holiday in the United States, and it's very quiet and I don't know, very pretty, but everyone is kind of inside to themselves. But other days when the sun is out and it's not as humid or not raining, everyone is sort of out on the sidewalks, out on the streets. So you can tell almost like what kind of socialization in a very Jane Jacobs way, how is the citizenship of the city or the place just by getting quickly outside. Even if you just go around the block, you can get that sense.
Can you explain what you mean by a Jane Jacobs way?
Yeah, Jane Jacobs, an urbanist and an advocate of the of many things in New York City, and sort of famously, she wrote a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. But she also famously, from her purview in the West, or actually the Greenwich Village, not the West Village of New York City, she observed how people behave, and specifically sidewalk rules. So she had a lot of thoughts about how people would behave on sidewalks. And as an early interaction designer, not in the world, but just my early career, I took a lot of inspiration from that in terms of human behavior. Just thinking about like watching people, observing people on sidewalks. Jane Jacobs in the 1960s had a lot of inspiration for me, and urban planning parlayed into interaction design. So, while I don't think about that directly each time I go outside, I still love to kind of get at sense of what does the city feel like, or what does my neighborhood feel like? And I use my dog as the reason to get out. It's also good exercise. But yes, Jane Jacobs says many things. She was, I think she's very much worth looking up even still today. Very, very important in the history of New York City.
So I've been thinking a lot about, thank you for bringing her up. This brings me to something I've been thinking about, which is desire paths, or sometimes architects refer to these as these are these dirt paths that go across beautiful greens, often seen on campuses, right? There'll be sidewalks all around, but students want to take the most direct path to school or to class, right? And so there's these dirt paths that have been created, much to the chagrin of architects. And I've been thinking about how that relates to kind of the path of least resistance, how that relates to our interactions with technology, and that we often want to use it, the path of least resistance, right? We want to use technology in a way that gets us to where we want to go, despite the sidewalks, if you will, the metaphorical sidewalks. Curious if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you bring that up because, I believe Christopher Alexander, another, architect, urban planner, I believe, I wouldn't say he was not an urban planner, but an architect. I believe he coined the term desire lines and that kind of idea of being, whether it's efficient or even joyful, like finding the path between two or more places. And I believe, I'm sure we'll find out.
Check that.
But I believe so. At least he had some work that he did in that space, and I too gained inspiration from that in early digital spaces where you'd be able to check the log files when we used to be able to have to manually,
Right.
and kind of arduously do that, and watch people use navigation that you designed otherwise, but yet people were taking a different route. And you thought, well, it would be so clear if you did it this other way. But of course, people are taking shortcuts their own way. And absolutely. Now, as we think about and experience so many ways that we can take shortcuts, so many ways that we'll just, mention immediately AI giving us the opportunity to shortcut lots of different ways to do things that we have spent years training people to do. Take the opportunity to be designers, design leaders, coders, different things. And AI gives us an opportunity to do that immediately. So what is the way to look at the same thing, desire paths, to observe how to parlay that into a new kind of career path or a new kind of skill set. And I don't think there's anything wrong with taking the desire path. So I think actually desire paths are incredibly useful if you take them as learning opportunities instead of continuing to prevent people from using them, because they're incredibly instructive. You're observing human behavior in that way, and you can learn something from why people are going from A to B.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another warm-up question. What is they usually don't last this long, but you have fascinating answers, so we're going to go with it. What is your favorite creativity tool? Creativity broadly defined. You get to define it. No right answer.
Looking around on my desk, seems I've surrounded myself with a lot of different physical tools. But I think when I am stuck, that's what comes to mind.
Okay.
It's not any of these physical things that are quite beautiful,
Sure.
markers and pens and lovely things. But, there are a number of pieces of writing, texts, not just books, but like specific passages in books that it feels like if I read them, it's almost like they're a piece of music. Like I get unlocked. And so I'd say that is my creativity tool. And it's like odd what those passages are. For example,
Yes, I'd love an example.
There's a book by Adam Gopnik, who's a wonderful writer for The New Yorker, and he's written some books as well. And it's just a book that, I'd say just a book. It's such a feat to write a book, but it's called Through the Children's Gate. And it's not one of his most well-known books, but there's some passages in it about New York City. And for some reason, the way that he writes about them, and there are just a few in there, every time I read them, I feel inspired the same way I feel when I put on specific pieces of music and I kind of just light up. So for me, those, I think more than anything else, more than the beautiful paper that I love to write on or the beautiful, tools that really help me do my job, when I'm truly feeling stuck, those are the things. And I have, maybe 8 or 10 of those kinds of things, those texts.
And do you continue to accumulate these texts, or do you think that's your library for the rest of your life? 8 to 10, you've got them.
No, I hope, oh gosh, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? If they were just like locked in time. But I hope they do accumulate. I used to keep a blog of those paragraphs and make it public. Oh. And I stopped, I mean, it's still out there, but I stopped kind of posting to that. But yeah, no, so it grows. It definitely grows. But the old ones don't expire. So there's no extinct passages, but they still continue to grow. So yeah, it's a growing library.
Awesome. And do you find you even have to read them, or can just seeing the book or the piece of paper inspire you?
I have to read them. It's a great question. That's a really interesting question, because I do also have a definitive relationship to the spine, but it's the spine of a book, that is. So seeing the relationship of this, the spine brings up certain memories. I have a hard time. I have one of the little free libraries outside my house. Very difficult for me to fill it because I can't get rid of any books, because each one has such a deep memory. But no, the creative unblocking has to come from reading those passages.
Interesting. And do you go to specific passages for different kinds of blocks?
No, actually. Okay. No, it's just kind of a general, like rolling around in the words, a general kind of throwing yourself into the text kind of feeling.
That's beautiful.
It's kind of weird, but yes.
No, it's beautiful.
That is true.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so now for the serious questions, although I think those were quite serious, what we covered already. Mm-hmm. But for the career questions, how did you get your start in technology and design? Did you have I should be in tech, I should be in design moment? Or was it only in retrospect?
I did and I didn't. When I was young, when I was a kid, I was lucky to have 2 parents who were very entrepreneurial, even though I don't think we talked about that at all as kids. But both my parents, they owned their own business, and that was entrepreneurial, I suppose. But on the side, they did all these things. My dad was a volunteer PBS camera person, which had nothing to do with his job, and he had his own cable access TV show at the public library. My mom founded a soccer league for girls because there was no sport for my sister to play, so she decided to start her own soccer league. And when all my friends were getting game consoles, my dad was like, we're going to learn how to code, and like, it's going to be better. Watch, it's going to be better, Oh my gosh. I remember, I thought, he said it, and then he came home with an armful of basically a computer, like a, giant computer, set it up, and he was like, oh, it's going to be great. And so in my mind, I thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. How he described it, in my mind, I just saw colors and Frogger and, donkey. I saw all these things that my friends were having. And then, sort of methodically, we line by line, we coded, and he would describe these things that in my mind I saw as the colorful games my friends had. And then when we finally hit, I think it was run or execute the final line, the final command at the end, and the little ASCII, Frogger characters ran across the screen, I thought, oh, and, he said, well, that's it. Now I'm paraphrasing, but you can now do whatever you want because now you know how to make your own games yourself. You don't need to. And I just thought, well, this is terrible. I'm in a closet with a computer. He had set it up in this like converted closet in the dark. And I thought, well, I'm going to go back to my friend's house. So, I think in retrospect, so it wasn't until later when I did pursue a graduate degree where I found a program at Carnegie Mellon that was a joint studio between a writing program and a design program, because I found something at the intersection of writing and design felt so generative to me. I was both indecisive. I couldn't decide if I was a writer or, wanted to pursue design, which I hadn't really explored too much yet. But also it felt to me that they were inextricably tied. One influenced the other. And so it felt quite important, but also quite magical to see that they had combined a studio where they put the writers and the designers together. 2 programs, humanities and design school, 2 colleges. And I thought that was important. And in that program, I felt myself kind of leveraging that, generative, set of values, childhood. It felt very familiar to me to make things, to invent things. But also I then came across the work of, we read all the kind of texts, the foundational texts. Dick Buchanan was the head of the design school at the time. And we ran across the work of people who were doing things like observing human behavior to inform product design. Brenda Laurel came and spoke to us. It was just the, 4 mothers and, 4 leading women and men of interaction design who came to speak when the field was just getting off the ground, or maybe wasn't even really a field quite yet. That's when I thought this idea of observing human behavior to really inform what people use just swept me off my feet. And I didn't even know what it might be called, but I found it so compelling in that same way that I was describing with the text, how your heart beats faster when you want to talk about it and you find other people whose ideas kind of feel, their eyes sparkle, their hearts beat faster, and you kind of find those connections. That's how I felt when I was there learning about these ideas. And I've chased that feeling ever since. So, yeah, I think that's a long answer, but it was, the foundation was, as a child, more in sort of like the values and the morals, that I was lucky enough to have with my parents, but then very much pursued it in graduate school. And that was where I found other people and learned what it was called and had the confidence to try it out.
Yeah. Can you speak a little more about how you see the connection between design and writing? And is writing a kind of design with just a different material output, or do you see it as fundamentally different?
Yeah, I remember when I had my first interview for a job in graduate school, and it was my first real job. I had had a job in between undergraduate and graduate school as a teacher. I lived overseas and I was teaching in Japan. And
Oh, that adds a whole nother level. That's a fascinating culture to inform design as well. Do you think that influenced you?
I do. I think, in fact, that was, designing lesson plans and then also being in the culture, learning about that and learning the language. And it was a whole other chapter. And yes, in my last year of graduate school, I had an interview for a designer position. And I remember the creative director of this firm that was one of the cool, interesting firms to work for, asked me this question, the same one. This is many years ago, before many of the things we work on now. And I thought, well, I don't think there is a difference. I remember thinking, and I was, this was a long time ago, and this person was very successful and very, had such authority. And I thought, well, I know he wants me to say that design is the preeminent and predominant discipline, and writing is kind of subservient, and maybe design takes the lead. And I know that was the answer he was looking for. And I couldn't help but say, there is no difference. They are both of equal importance and they're tied. And in fact, writing is a kind of design. And of course, today, many times over in the course of these decades, we've seen that through content strategy, which has always been present, and, now AI and, the fine tuning and evaluation that goes on behind the scenes, and sometimes not behind the scenes, where language, tone, personality, the words that we use are not just the words that are on the interface, but the language and that interaction between person and machine, but also, person to person, sort of supported by machine, are so important. And the line between what is design and the words is, I think, is blurry and maybe doesn't matter as much. But yes, I think they're inextricable. And I think going back to the academic setting, rhetoric and the art of making an argument and, discourse analysis and some of these sort of disciplines and deep disciplines that are so key to linguistics, so key to sort of providing fundamentals. They're not just fundamentals, but foundational principles to understanding how we interact, and forming those shapes to people have truly informed, I think, what we're experiencing today with these chat interfaces and everything else that's come on top.
So I'm struck by something I heard a couple of weeks ago, and the role that the way that AI is influencing the way we inform. One colleague said, I don't read anymore. I just put documents into an AI and have it spit out the 5 bullet points, the highlights. Mm-hmm. And another a researcher said, I don't write anymore. I just give AI the bullet points and I have it spit out the paper. All in the same day. And so my question for you, as somebody who values writing so much, is in a time when we're cognitively overloaded and we have these tools to do this synthesis, to expand and contract these arguments, how should we be thinking about writing?
Yeah. Well, just like, have you ever seen Henry Petrowski's the book, The Pencil?
Yes.
I don't know, it's 380 some pages or maybe more.
Can you summarize it for our listeners in a sentence or so?
The pencil is technology that has changed the world. And so you don't have to read. So there it is, one bullet point. And I think that entry point and exit point, the 5 bullet points on either side, are going to become and are becoming different entry and exit points for us that we build upon. So like the pencil changed, like many of these things, I've been collecting examples of things that scared us.
Yes.
The rite of spring, Stravinsky's rite of spring rather, which, people ran screaming from the theater.
Oh, that's a great example.
Classical music was played. So just, the pencil, many things that seem...
The microwave is the one I've been thinking about, Liz, lately. My grandmother was terrified that the microwave was going to ruin all home cooking.
And rightly so. The microwave does have damaging aspects to it if you don't use it correctly, AI as well. But I think to your question, there will be and are and have been examples of how we're able to build upon those 5 bullet points and become different kinds of writers. That's a blanket statement, but I think that there's dynamism and interestingness and more engaged work to be done, rather than saying, it's changed and we have to, be alarmed and try to retain something. I think there's a lot to be alarmed at, but I also think that there's a lot to be excited about and invent new ways of writing and being. So, I think I like to collect these examples because it's good to remember all the ways that we've been fearful about these things before and the ways that they've progressed us forward in design and creative fields, I think specifically.
Another one is computer-aided design. That was, I remember professors being terrified that was going to ruin everybody's, ability to design.
Right.
And it's changed it, to your point. Thank you for that reflection. Going back to your career, I invite you to think about a surprising thing you've learned so far in your journey. If there was a moment, perhaps a failure, perhaps a extreme success that has stuck with you and informed how you move about every day and do your work.
Well, I think something that comes to mind is you thinking about access. And I have been astounded by how inaccessible people and things seem to be.
What's an example, Liz?
So, for example, the busiest or the people who are at the top of their fields seem to be the most accessible people who would be willing to chat, spend 15 minutes, a half an hour over a coffee or a Zoom chat or, a phone call.
Sure.
And the first ones to reply back to a message if you reached out. And so reaching out to people, cold emailing, whatever the method is of choice, LinkedIn messages and et cetera, has been one way that in the past I have, I like to write, I like email, I like notes, I like letters and so I've had
do you send handwritten letters?
I do send not cold handwritten letters, but I do send lots and lots of letters. I love thank you notes and things like that. So I do. Too many, probably. And
wait, why too many? Why too many?
Well, sometimes I'll go and visit someone that I know, and then I'll see a bookcase or something filled with only cards and letters from me or little notes and things from me. And I realized maybe I need to pause Yeah.
But Liz,
so,
they're saving them. They're precious items. I
true.
think that's the opposite indicator.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to think about it. I think maybe there needs to be other people. It's me plus one other person. But it seems like I'm upholding the USPS sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do love it. But I think I think that I have found that one of the ways of learning for me has been hearing from other people, asking them lots of questions, asking them how they what inspires them, how they got to where they are. And I had been surprised early on when someone told me, just reach out, just if you are inspired by so and so. I think the person at the time was Michael Beirut, someone said, and just remember the I and the E in his name. Don't misspell his name, they said.
For our listeners, can you one sentence explain who he is and what he did?
Yeah, Michael Beirut has been a long time designer of many things at Pentagram, and he's a partner at Pentagram, so a firm that he did a lot of logos and graphic identities, but also wayfinding and sort of experiences, and had been is still very, very involved in the design scene, specifically graphic design, but kind of expanded into digital design. And I think for a few decades was teaching at the Yale School of Art and the Yale School of Management, and just announced his retirement or sort of transition into a different kind of role just a couple weeks ago. And so I think that's why he's on my mind. But he had given that advice to just reach out to people, and had that experience of just reaching out to him early on. And I think that has been something that I've done for a long time, just kind of reach out to people and get connected, and really been surprised at the people's responses and how they are willing to, especially people at the top of their field, will respond immediately. And this is going back many, many years, a practice that I've had. So
wonderful.
I think
do you have a concrete example, Liz? You don't have to reveal names, but just something that happened because you reached out.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. There is a famous, well, I don't know, it's not famous, but there is a wonderful pianist that I should think of something work related.
No, I actually love Liz. I did not expect you to say pianist, so I love this. Keep going. You reached out to a pianist because why not?
There's I have a personal website that I used to be very active on and draw inspiration from different aspects. So for me to think about design, I usually think about it in terms of urban planning or music or
I love it.
Food or, something else, astronomy. I mean, it could be lots of different categories. And so one of them, someone that I used to draw inspiration from is one of two pianists, actually. One in particular who did a lot of writing himself and would write about classical music in that way. And I was very impressed when he wrote back to me. And, I think it bridges the gap between you writing about or thinking about or designing things sort of in your own space, and then actually making these connections in the world so that the world continues to feel human and accessible, and careers feel more possible, whether it's, your own career or careers of other people. So there's something about that connecting with people, no matter who they are, that just, I don't know, for me, makes the world just feel more human. Yeah. And so that's one example. I'm sure there are many.
Absolutely beautiful. That was the last thing I expected you to say. And I think it's so exciting to think about all the people we can reach out to across domains.
Yeah. And there's been other kind of more standard examples of there's a woman who is, I think, traditionally a UX researcher. I remember years ago, she wrote her first book on UX research. And I remember we hadn't ever met. I wrote her an email and it just said, I really love your book. It would be so great if we had the chance to meet one day. And, I think at the time and probably still today, she lives in San Francisco. I live in New York on the East Coast. And, we've since met, but not because of that email. It just kind of put me on her radar. This was years and years ago. And I do things like that all the time, kind of in the field.
I love that.
Just saying to someone, thank you for your work.
Yes.
I think it's great. Now we do that all the time on LinkedIn and give signals to people, but signaling to someone that their work is important and made a difference. I think I make sure to make that note all the time, whether it's privately or publicly.
Well, Liz, I should say that is an example of something I did with you. I have followed your work for a long time and always been very impressed with it. And it was my intention, although private, that I would meet you someday and that I got to meet you and said, wonderful. This was I had been wanting to do this. So this is a real, a wonderful moment for me too. So thank you for saying yes
Likewise.
To me and answering my call. Okay, a few more questions. Now we're going to come up to the contemporary, come up to today. What are you excited about that you are working on today? What gives you that tingle that you're working on today?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, I should think about something that is more design related. So I am very excited about the work that we're doing at Microsoft. And I love thinking about our team and working across different geographies. So we get the opportunity to work across many geographies and learning about cultures. So that always gets me very excited and like learning about different people across the teams that we work with. And
can you briefly describe what you're doing at Microsoft? I know in the intro I said one sentence, but maybe a few more sentences about the work that you are leading there.
Yeah, so our team at Microsoft is called Microsoft AI, and our team broadly does many different things, but creates responsible AI for people kind of directly to consumers. So I want to describe it in the negative, but unlike, the enterprise side where we're looking at tools like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or the 365 tools or Xbox or things like that, we get to build products directly for people. And that comes with thinking a lot about responsible AI and what directly people need and are curious about. So we get to do a lot of work directly with people all over the world and do work with our researchers and writers and designers to think about that. Our team is also global. And my team specifically works on generative AI and search specifically. I also have the UX writing team or content design team as part of it. And so we're doing like experiments in that space, but we're also launching products that are either search related or extensions of the search experiment in like search experience and AI search. And so there's lots of different aspects of that. And we partner with the Copilot team and the many different aspects of the Copilot team and thinking about Microsoft Copilot. So it's a never-ending evolution of what that means. And every day there seems to be new expressions and new ways that people are thinking about it. So it's been, I think someone said when we started this journey, every day is a new year in AI, and it's really never stopped being that like new year. So I've been doing this for just about 3 years, and so it feels like, I don't know, 365 times 3 years of AI experience. So it's quite interesting, and the culture internally is quite experimental and
That's great.
open and collaborative. And one of our values in Microsoft AI is kindness. So it's just been this wonderful journey inside. So that's what I'm working on.
Thank you. How would you describe responsible AI for people who aren't familiar with that idea?
So, yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier a bit about things that are frightening when it comes to new technologies. And so the way that we have to think about AI is we have to make sure that it is appropriate, ethical, making sure that it is understood and kind of recognized by people who are using it, and following standards and guidelines and policies that are set either by Microsoft for our own internal policies, or also there could be state regulations or even federal regulations. Sure. And so it's sort of a combination of all of those things. But if you can imagine, when you use something basic AI related, you might see things around the interface that are letting you know that you're using AI. So one of a very simple policy or a very simple standard might be just to alert someone that what you're using is not a human, but rather AI related. Right. So that's one kind of aspect. But it also is, on the back end, making sure it's accurate and legible, and kind of there's all these aspects. So there are teams that are doing things like red teaming systems, making sure that they're pressing the system to make sure that it's going to be appropriate given some standards. So there's lots of aspects of responsible AI, and teams now like Microsoft and Anthropic and Google and others have offices of the responsible AI, and design teams work with these offices to make sure that the design itself stands up to those standards.
I've been thinking about, as somebody who's been in design for a long time, Liz, why are we calling it out as responsible? The word responsibility, because we've been designing products for years, and my sense and my experience has been there's always been responsible design, right? Yeah. There's always somebody looking at standards and looking at all these things. So why do you think we're calling it? Why does it have a special name now?
Yeah, great question to ask. My hunch is, I don't know the exact answer, but it's an interesting question. My hunch is that if it doesn't have a name, people aren't going to do it. That's my hunch. Okay. And before this, there was, before this, and this has not stopped, but we have inclusive design, right? So we have, if we were drawing a diagram together, yes, we would have an inclusive design swim lane. We would perhaps, before that, we would have a sustainable design swim lane. Right. And then there might be a responsible design swim lane that's coming later. And then there would be a responsible AI swim lane. I think, I think it's just chapters of education and awareness, tools, and maturity in design. I don't think they're new. I don't think these things are new, to your point, but I think the maturity of more and more designers is what's new. And maybe my hunch is that more designers are having to incorporate more of these practices, whereas before that might have been the job of specialists.
Oh, interesting.
But it's a great question. I've not thought about it that way, and I would wonder what other people would say.
Awesome. Thank you. 2 last questions, which are not particularly easy, but we'll ask them. What do you still want to learn and do? This is in your career, in your life, like what do you look ahead to and get excited about?
So I think I have been on a lifelong journey to learn how to improvise. That is the simple answer.
Wow.
And that applies to music. I can only play classical music. I can't even play jazz. That applies, I can't only like read music. I can't even take away the music and I just can't do anything. But it also applies to how prepared I am. So as a design leader,
Yes.
person who has to lead things in design, I'm often called upon to do things at the last minute, and I do it, but I don't like it. And I think that I have to, and I'm also a parent, right? And life is chaotic. And I think that I truly have been on this journey over the course of my life to embrace improvising. And, I do want to not just learn to tolerate it, but to learn to be great at it. And I want to be good at being the person that can walk into a room and deliver the perfect, speech kind of off the top of my head or this kind of thing. But I only do those things when they're planned. That's what I think. That's probably not actually true. So that's something that I really want to work on. But I think I also want to get better at, simple things like making quilts, which isn't a recent hobby of mine. So there's simple things like that I want to get better at that are, I want to get better at making things with my hands. But I think in terms of like a big thing that I really want to do, truly, as a person, it's learning to be better at improvising. And it's something that I've been working on since I can remember.
Wow. That's beautiful. I would argue you've been improvising during this entire conversation, and you are quite competent at it. But I understand there's different contexts. Mm-hmm. My final question for you is, what unexpected advice do you have for those entering the design and tech field? What would you tell your younger self?
So, if I like to think I have many different pieces of advice for my younger self. So I was thinking about this. Someone asked me this question recently, and I don't always have the same answer from my younger self. So I'll just say that.
Okay.
My answer for myself today is about the power of relationships. I think when I was young, I didn't realize that friendships or relationships in general kind of stick around. They felt, my relationship with the person that I met on the swing set, or, the person that you were in school with or you worked with or whatever, they seemed temporal, and they can be. But there are also relationships that started a long time ago that last. And lasting relationships are so important. I had this honor, like honor is this very tiny word, to help put together an event with Gloria Steinem and her best friend of over 60 years, Barbara Nessum, a woman, Angie Wojak, and I, who's part of SVA's Alumni Affairs group. SVA is the School of Visual Arts. She and I had this opportunity to put together this event, and the thesis was that relationships have power, and it was specifically an event about the power of female relationships. And essentially, there was there is a hour-long conversation between the two of them about why they are how not why, but how they became friends and roommates, and then how they've stayed together for 60 some years. I think at this point it's probably 70 years now, but I think at the time it was 66 years, and the answers were surprising. And so if I think about that, I was reflecting on how I look back and some of the people I've known for all of these years. I'm not 60, but I hope to aspire to that. And I hope to lean on those relationships. They said that Gloria Steinem at that time said that there's the power to being a little bit naive in the way that you approach your career and the path that you want to take if and when you have these support networks around you, because it's like you get to be curious and kind of want, this is me saying this. My takeaway was you get to be curious and kind of wander around and follow your curiosity because you have your support. You have your person, you have the people around you. And I just thought that's so beautiful to think about. And so if I were to go back and give myself advice, I would just remind myself that what we're doing when we're creating these relationships doesn't have to be temporal. It could be something that is structural and building for a lifetime. And it's a little heavy maybe for somebody to hold on to when they're little.
Well,
But
and
that's
I'm struck, thank you. I'm struck by, you just wrote a beautiful reflection upon returning from the Smithsonian Design Museum high school design competitions, which I read, and I thought it was lovely. And the takeaway from that I read was the power of community. And I can't help but connect that to this recommendation you have of like build and grow relationships, because they are the foundation.
Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your time and stories with us, Liz. Thank you for listening to the Technical Difficulties podcast, produced by the Center for Human-Computer Interaction and Design and the McCormick School of Engineering at Northwestern University. And you can find out more about her in the show notes. You can learn more about the show by going to technicaldifficultiespodcast.com. Drop us a note at technicaldifficultiesteam@gmail.com or leave us a review on your favorite podcast app.